great shock maybe to the West. At that time, of course, the West was very much influenced by Greece and Rome, by Greek thought, Roman thought, and the rise of Christianity already gave the impression to me that they were thinking also of a kind of a world domination. That is why they gradually try to spread their mission and try to make discoveries, try to control the trade routes, and to some extent they did succeed until right down in the 16th century, when they began gradually to have the, shall we say, the counter-attack by controlling the trade routes, by gradually trying to colonize Muslim lands and to bring about changes into the minds of Muslims, and then also the study of Islam by them, a very profound studies. Why they begin to have to learn about Islam? Because they realize that they have to overcome Muslim society. They have to understand Islam, they have to understand the language, they have to try to understand the meaning of the Quran. So in other words, and they find also there are some problems with them, because some of the things mentioned by the Muslims from the beginning, that is to say in the Quran and so on, were criticism against them, especially against the Catholicism, Christianity. And therefore Islam, when it appeared on the stage of world history, not only challenged the West, militarily, but also intellectually and theologically. So we have to understand all this to see how the dialogue, confrontation is always between us. And as I said in that book, Islam and Secularism, I said this confrontation is forever. Yes, in other words, I don't think that there will be a kind of final and peaceful agreement. Therefore we have to understand that. Unless, of course, we follow what they propose to us. But I don't think we can follow everything. Already now, they are interfering with many things about human rights, about the meaning of life, about the meaning of man, who we are. I think last time I want to repeat that for the sake of people who might not be here at that time. I said that in the very beginning, when they speak about the science of man, they go back to the Greeks, people like Aristotle, Plato, because these were the two main interpreters, and they represent the foundation of Western civilization. But the Greeks, when they talk about man, they talk about the soul, the psyche, and therefore gradually the psychology of that. In other words, it's the science of the soul, literally translated. And when people like Aristotle wrote the Nicomachean Ethics, that is his book about the prelude politics. In other words, this Nicomachean Ethics is written as a prelude to his other work, politics, which means that obviously this is something that has to be practiced in politics. Rather than in that Nicomachean Ethics, although not very much is being said, they did about the soul, about how to inculcate good character. And of course they did not say very much about the soul because they did not receive revelation on these things. They were using the reason, the thinking, but the thinking, of course, is based already on ideas that were already floating in the air of the ancient world. Because, as I have been saying, the teachings of the Prophet Musa, of the Prophet Ibrahim, all these were already floating all over that part of the world, even perhaps going to places like India and so on, Ibrahim, because the Middle East, that is the most ancient of civilizations, like Sumeria, like Egypt, like Mesopotamia, like Assyria, Babylon, all this were much older than Hinduism, than the Indian civilization, even than the Persian. As I said last time in the other lecture room, I said that this human civilization seems to have begun about 7,000 years ago from now. That's about 5,000 years before Jesus Christ. So in other words, the Persian civilization about 6,000 years. The Chinese and the Indian almost similar, about 5,000 years ago. Yes. So that in that respect, this civilization that began in what we call the Middle East is very, there must be some sort of meaning behind that, because most of the prophets that were mentioned seem to be from that region. And also the great teachers of the other civilizations like Buddha, Confucius, they came to existence around 500 years before Jesus. That means about 2,500 years ago. Quite recent, if you think about that. But then, this human civilization, as we said, supposing we say it begins about 7,000 years ago. And archaeologists and so on cannot find earlier traces of civilization. And from my understanding, I don't think they can ever find all this civilization of the past. Because a lot of that is based on reports of this ancient civilization. That means whatever is before that, a lot of this comes under in some literature, religion. You see, about the Prophet Noah, for example, the Great Flood. This was recorded also first of all, in the Jewish scripture, the teaching of Syed Musa. That is okay in the Old Testament. And it was also reported in the Assyrian tablets of the king Ashurbanipal, much older than. But least 300 or 400 years earlier than Buddha and Confucius. Ashurbanipal, his library has got this tablet which contains writings talking about the flood, giving the impression that this flood must have happened very early. So in other words, beyond that we know very little, but at least because of revelation, in the Jewish, for example, genealogical tree of these prophets, from Noah going to Adam, so several generations, maybe not several, but a lot, I'm sure. So what I have been trying to say last time was to tell the Muslims that the Prophet Adam was quite recent, and therefore they should not get confused with what the anthropologists are saying, as if mankind has been existing since a million years ago. Yes. Because in their case, they use the same word for mankind, that is like homo. That's why I said that I think as a Muslim we cannot agree with this word homo to mean the mankind that we are talking about. Because even the anthropologists, they make some distinction. They talk about the Homo erectus, they talk about Homo this, Homo that, and finally Homo sapien, that is us. But still, they use the word Homo for all this, which means that they are connecting all these previous creatures with man. That's why I said with the question of theory of evolution and so on, later on people like Darwin, in a scientific manner, I mean, he tried to show about the origin of species, the idea of evolution. But then the idea of evolution, I think, as I said, has been in the experience and consciousness of Western civilization, Western man. They always think about change, about a constant change for, these ideas, especially after the Middle Ages, because the early Greeks did not think of the development of man from the idea that there was a state of nature and then gradually there was a transition. The early Greeks did not think like that. People like Aristotle did not conceive the development of man from the idea of transition. Because I think they believe in the eternity of the world. They believe also in the eternity of mankind. And therefore there is no question of state of nature transition. This is not part of their thinking. This came late. This idea of nature, state of nature, I think only after the Renaissance, after the Enlightenment, this recent, a few hundred years back, these ideas began to be what we call this, accepted in Western thought. And then gradually the idea of the study of man, study of the soul, began to gradually change from the psyche of the Greeks to the anthropos, and then anthropos, then anthropology, the study of man. They said these people in the Enlightenment, in the beginnings of the modern period, they are saying that man is not soul. Soul is something different. So because of that, gradually they restricted the study of man to the study of this biological entity, to the study of what we call the hayawan aspect. And when they study also reason, when they study rationality, that rationality also is gradually restricted to psychological, to subconscious, to people like Freud, like James, like Jung and Adler. These are the great thinkers which have proposed these ideas. Until now, people believe in this. We have new sciences, psychiatrists, and psychoanalysis. So all this, the psychoanalysis of Freud, he is saying that it's not, he's not talking about the soul. He's talking about the study of the actions that proceed from this flesh and blood human being. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that this idea of evolution, this from the very beginning, it has been like that. In terms of, even in terms of religion. Thomas Aquinas is a great imam, as it were. That's in the medieval period. I think about 1200, 1300, 12, yes. Thomas Aquinas. But even he said that, this religion is developing. As if they just realized that religion also has to develop, has to move on. That, of course, perhaps in their case it is like that, because both the Judaism, in other words, Judaism and Christianity in their scriptures did not mention very much about the nature of man, of the soul, nothing almost. If you compare with the Quran, of course you can't compare, because the Quran speaks about many things. But these earlier scriptures, at least the Old Testament, they also talk about some history, about the history of the early prophets, kind of like a chronology, yes, about the doings of the Bani Israel. But the New Testament, I didn't say very much about history. Didn't go talking about, only talk about, of course, history in terms of people like St. Paul and all these letters that they write, and the development of doctrine, the councils that they have been having, Council of Nicaea, Council of Chalcedon, Council of Constantinople. All this, they're talking about how their doctrine develops. Yes. Therefore, that's why they think religion develops. And then gradually, today, in modern times, again, at least there is a separation between the Catholics and Protestants, because there is some disagreement. Although basically, as far as Trinity is concerned, there is not much, they cannot disagree with that. Even with the Eastern Church, I mean the churches in the Arab lands, in the Middle East, the Russian Orthodox and so on, still there is of course a Trinity. The Christianity must have Trinity. Without that, it is no longer Christian. And it is precisely that Islam is actually confronting the West about it. And then today, of course, you can see that many of them are talking about gradually, about so many doctrines and so on which are uncertain, which are creating doubts about the nature of Jesus, about God. You see that, therefore, and the fact that there is no name, and so many things like that which we see today. Yes. So they are changing. They follow the times. The Muslims, of course, Islam, the basic things cannot change. But the Muslims are the ones who has to change, because sometimes they have They have forgotten a lot about the basic thing and about the West, about this other civilization that are confronting them. They haven't been studying that. They are still today, in other words, when we speak about, you look at the Muslim world today, they're almost tyrannical governments. Yeah. Why? What has happened? They did not elaborate very much on justice. Yes. Although they talk about the law, but the juries didn't say very much about justice. They did say in some of their writings, mentioned here and there, but not as a collective ideas and explain as a whole. The case of the West, they, based on their experience of tyranny, of the tyranny of their rulers, yes, they're being enslaved by the feudal system and so on. At least based on their experience, they begin to think about what is justice. Whereas the Muslims, they have been given that in Revelation. And they also, some of the great jurists in the past said a few things here and there about justice, but not specifically talking about justice. So that, of course, we can say as a kind of a definition that I have been putting forward. I said justice is a condition of things being in their proper places. That, of course, is a proper definition, but a lot of things have to be elaborated, isn't it? About proper places, what is meant by all this. That also, in fact, it implies that there are different places. Places are not the same. They cannot be the same. And yet, some of the Muslims before were not talking about being the same. From the beginning, already there were people who insist that Islam levels everybody to the same level. But this is not Islam. Even God does not look upon us in the same sort of level as His creatures, yes. As humans, yes. But that verse, Inna akramakum indallah atqakum, already shows that God does not look at everybody in the same way, that they are the same, in other words. The Quran said, وَفَضَّلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ دَرَجَاتٍ. We have given different degrees. We have, given them different degrees of excellence. But yet the modernists, especially in recent times, from the past also, they were teaching like that. But I think gradually the modernists among the Muslims, from the time of people like Al-Afghani, Muhammad Abdul, and his followers, that they want to level everything. As if gradually, this is the influence coming from the West also, of course, about socialism. And therefore gradually society is being elevated. Of course, society is important, but the individual is also important. You cannot just forget the individual, because society is composed of individuals, and also it is created by individuals. All prophets and so on, like that, they are the creators of civilizations. They are individuals. And the prophet themselves, they are not of the same level of excellence. They are prophets, yes. Only that what they brought, that is the same. What God had revealed to them, that is the same. So, in other words, this of course, two words referring to mankind. Just as they have the word homo, human, humanist, we have two words. One of them is insan, and the other one is bashar. Now let us say about this insan, about the creation of man. You already know the Quran talks about the creation of Adam, the creation of Khalifa, yes? The fact that he is given knowledge, that he is also given the names, that means some language, the possibility of speech, of understanding communication, of naming things, yes? So in other words, already it is clear there that this is not a caveman. It is not some ignorant, something like that, no. And then we have the verse in the Quran which I mentioned in the beginning of our talk about religion 2 years ago. That verse, it says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ. We have created man from the best part of many parts of the clay, the choicest parts. That is what means sulalatin min tin. Because sulala refers to that, the one that is choicest, the one that is pure, the purest, in other words. So that ثم جعلناه نطفة في قرار مكين. And then we make it this sperm, the sperm, and put that sperm in a place that is firmly fixed in the womb. ثم خلقنا النطفة علقة. Then this sperm gradually became a clot, the mixture of the sperm of the man as well as the woman became a clot. وخلقنا علقة مضغة. It became lump, bigger, gradually. وخلقنا المضغة لحما. وخلقنا المضغة عظاما. We drew out from there again, God said, bones. فكسونا العظام لحما. And then we covered the bone with flesh. And then it says that ثم انشأناه خلقا آخر. That is the only important that one, I think. Because this word, ansha'nahu, nasha'a, what does this mean? This means, in other words, we elevate, we raise the rank, the excellence. That's what anasha'a. So in other words, what it means is that God gives you the soul. The soul is put into this, or associated with this lump of flesh that has become bones and so on and so on. Now, the introduction of the soul. By the introduction of the soul, a third entity has come into existence. This is the soul, the body. Because of that joining, there is a third entity. So, mansha'nahu khalqan akhara. That khalqan akhara is this third entity. That is man. That's why the learned in the past said man is neither soul by itself fully, nor body fully. It is a combination, shall we say. It is a new creation. It is something new. That's also one of the meanings of ansha, nasha. Something originated, something new. So in other words, I think the way how this thing has happened in the West, because of the dualism, therefore they are talking about soul, body, spirit, matter. As a result, gradually people rejected the one and took the other. Yes? In other words, there is no question of a third entity. So I think perhaps you remember some lectures past here, talk rather in the past, we talked about the integrity of concepts, integrity in language, that you cannot change terms, that if you do that, you create all kinds of changes in the human mind and gradually in society. So this is how the conception of man gradually changing in the West until only, that's why their history, also their history is divided into classical, medieval, modern. Why is it divided like that? It precisely shows their experience. This is how they experience life. Our historians, we never divide history like that. History is just history, either before Islam, after Islam. There is no classical, medieval, modern. Although, of course, we are using this term now. Our people, our Muslims in Muslim universities everywhere, they are being influenced by these ideas. They call themselves modern literature, modern Arabic, as if there is a classical one, and then there is a medieval one. We don't have that really. In reality, this division into classical, medieval, what that already shows the idea of evolution, becoming more and more enlightened. That's why there is enlightenment. After classical, medieval, then Renaissance. Renaissance means to be born again. It's as if they felt themselves as if suddenly something new, which they do not know before, as if they were born anew. So they call that period the Renaissance, in which there is introduced a great deal also of the Roman or the Greek. The ideas about beauty, about education, art, and then finally the Enlightenment, the age of reason. That everything, they must say, we have to explain by reason. That, of course, is partly true. For example, when we say that people like Aristotle, the ancient Greeks, they got ideas about God, for example, partly it is from what has been reported in Revelation. We are not saying that they are not thinking, because somebody asked the question, is it not possible for Aristotle to discover one God by thinking or through the use of reason alone? Well, of course, you must think, but thinking also is based on something. Thinking also has what to do with words, with language. It is based on something. This something that it is based on, this is what we said, by the teaching, the ideas that were already there. Only he tried to understand it to them. Of course, therefore he is using thinking. It's not just not thinking like that. So in other words, we do acknowledge, the Muslims, we do acknowledge, even people like Al-Ghazali acknowledge the philosophers, although he attacks them, but he acknowledged them. He acknowledged the science or the knowledge, philosophy as a branch of knowledge, a very important branch, metaphysics and so on. Only what he disagreed about the philosophers on three things. One is their belief in the eternity of the world. They believe that the world has no beginning and there will be no end. It has always been like that, and it will always continue to be like that. Then the other thing that he disagreed with about the philosophers is the idea about the knowledge of God, that it does not encompass knowledge of particulars and individuals. In other words, God does not know what you are thinking now. These are all particular things. What is happening now. I'm listening, this thing, all these things. These are knowledge of particulars, what is going to happen and so on. This God does not know. He does not know in that sense. His knowledge is more general, universal. And then the third thing that the Muslims attack the philosophers is their belief, the rejection of belief in the resurrection of bodies. Because they said this is all, there is no such a thing. There is no resurrection. So in other words, then the problem comes around, what happens after death? Does the soul endure? Of course, the Quran says the soul is immortal. So the Muslim philosophers will say that all this about the spiritual thing, there is no resurrection of bodies. But then Al-Ghazali is not just a scholar like what some of these people who did not respect him, right? He's not just a scholar, he's also a philosopher. He's also a theologian. He's also a Sufi. So in other words, it is a combination of many things. And this is rather rare. Yes, because if he is not a philosopher, he will not be able to contradict the philosophers. By the philosophers here we mean the Greeks as well as the Muslims. So in other words, about the first part, we believe that there is a beginning. We do not believe in the eternity. Eternity meaning before. Eternity without beginning. We say no, there is a beginning. Beginning in the sense of the creation. In other words, there is an absolute beginning. By that absolute, I mean in the dim past, as far as we are concerned. There is a beginning. In other words, absolute beginning means that there was a time, or there was when the universe was not. Yes, and that there was only God. Now, because, in other words, it did not come by itself. Whereas this modern, we'll be speaking, even about the Big Bang, how this, all that is also part of these Aristotelian ideas. Whereas, because of this, people like Ibn Sina, a philosopher who was criticized by Al-Ghazali, precisely because of this, the integrity of concepts, because he used the term fa'il, God. Now, the word fa'il means a doer, the agent. He called God fa'il mujib, meaning a necessary doer, by which they mean that God acts out of necessity, meaning he cannot do otherwise. He must do it like that. So because of this, they talk about God also as a first cause. But a cause is not necessarily doing something. A cause is just a cause. For example, the sun radiates light. Now that the sun causes this light. But then the sun does not create the light. The sun cannot stop it from giving light. The sun cannot change the light. And therefore this God acts not in like that way, according to what is based on the Quran. God has a will. The thing come into existence because He said it could. Yes. In other words, He has a will. Therefore, He is not Fa'il Mujib, according to the Muslim. No, He is Fa'il Mukhtar. Mukhtar means from the word ikhtiyar. In other words, he gets choice. Because to be an agent, to be a doer, you must have will, you must have choice, you must have knowledge of what you are choosing, and of course the power. But this word, mujib, a necessary agent, you don't have this. The universe seems simply to just proceed from God. Whether God likes it or not, He cannot change it. He cannot say stop. It will go on like that. So in other words, this is the reason why, for example, even today of course, modern science, when they talk about the universe, they are still thinking like the early Greek philosophers also, as if it is eternal, as if it has always been like that. Even when they talk about Big Bang. But then, that has nothing to do with God. Even like Einstein saying that the universe behaves according to its own laws, and cosmological principles are different in the whole universe. The sun, the moon, the earth, and all the planets, every one of them have got their own way of doing things, which are all equally valid. And it develops on its own. That's why he said that there is no more role for God. Even if you talk about He started the Big Bang after that. So that's why I'm saying that it is still Aristotelian, because Aristotle said he is the one who is the first maker, first mover, but himself does not move. He is the first mover, but does not move. After the first movement, he just let the world go according to its own nature, shall we say. But the Muslim God, according to the Quran, is not like that. The Muslim God is all the time active. He is all the time active in the sense of some movement, but without change. So, according to modern science, of course, based on the idea of cause and effect and so on, movement causes change. But then, if the Quran says, كُلَّ يَوْمٍ هُوَ فِي شَأْنٍ, in other words, literally every day, he is in some kind of activity. And then in another passage, God says, لَا تَأْخُذُهُ سِنَةٌ وَلَا نَوْمٌ. He does not fatigue, does not touch him, nor does he feel sleepy. He is always active. So in other words, the conception of God in Islam is that he is active. He does not stop creating. And Dr. Zani also mentioned that the word Khaliq, Khalaq, Khalaqa, does not mean that create in the past, as if now he is not creative. He said, no, now also he is doing it all the time. And therefore, because we are saying that this whole universe is all the time a new creation. At every instant, it is new. And God in the Quran says that He has repeated, we created and then we repeat. And then He said also, Balhum Firaksin min Khalkin Jahid. They are in doubt about the new creation. In other words, most people don't see this. Most people don't realize. They think that new creation means the Akhirah. Of course, that also you can interpret in that way. But even now, every instant, the universe has disappeared. Kullu man alayha fan. Everything is annihilated, finished. A new one takes its place. The new one looks similar to that one, but it is not the same. It is new. And we also are like that. And people, even some of the philosophers, like even Sina, said that, you know, he was speaking about maybe every 1 day or 2, he said, every cell in your body is a different cell. Like in Sina, that 1,000 years ago, they have been talking like that. That's a very important scientific, now we are saying that. You see, we are all the time new. And yet, for example, we are also all the time conscious of our identity. Meaning there is something that is created in the same identity. Because if that is also changing all the time, how can we know ourselves? So in other words, about this, we cannot go on talking about that part, because I think that will take, in fact, it should take years of a course in the university to deal with this properly. And then about the knowledge of particulars, that also the Quran said that God knows, يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي ذَاتِ الصُّدُورِ. He knows what is going on in your very consciousness, whatever, even a fleeting moment in your mind, He knows that too. Yes. And then again, if there are 2 of you whispering together, talking together, He is the 3rd. The Quran also says that. If there are 3 of you, He is the 4th. So in other words, He is witness to everything. There is no escape from Him. So in other words, this, of course, the interpretation of this deals ultimately with the science of of Tawheed. And this we cannot just explain in a 1 or 2 nights like this. Yes. I think it takes a lifetime. Some people may understand, some people may not, but it doesn't mean to say that those who don't understand, provided they know that God is one, that He exists, that He is present, not absent. He is not the absent God of nature, or dead. No, He is present. He is all the time there. Wherever you turn, He is there all the time. And you are not conscious of this. And He is not these things. When we said He is there, the word there already implies a place, time. That, of course, in reality does not refer to God. But language also is in, certain words are being used, but which has a meaning which is not observable immediately. Now anyway, now then about God's knowledge of particulars, the philosophers are saying that God does not know particular things, because if he knows, then he will himself be created, be part of that creation. But this is the idea of God's connection to God should not be connected with the universe, in other words. Because they said, kalau dia connected with the universe, then he is also created. So they deny all this. But what we are saying is that the connection is rather, only those people, the prophets of course, they will be taught about these things. They have to undergo all kinds of training to understand that. The same with the learned and the wise. The same with the saints among the Muslims. So in other words, we are not going to talk so much about that here. But then the third one, about what the philosophers deny, resurrection of bodies. This also several years ago, about 50 years ago, it was discussed even here. People argue. I remember, because some problem, I think, with the fiqh, Singapore, and they're talking about what do you call it? The resurrection of bodies. Some of the so-called Muslim thinkers are trying to, what do you call it? Trying to deny, like some of the early philosophers. They quoted even Russian, the Averroes, who said that, when a person dies, then it becomes gradually, dissolved like vapor, water, and then vapor, and then rain, and become rain, then back to the earth, and then from the earth, again the sun, sort of unknown. So like that all the time. And that when the body is dissolved, it is impossible for it to be again sort of come into existence. So they are using the laws of physics, the science of physics. Of course, in the science of physics, that sort of thing becomes impossible. But you can't apply the laws of physics to God. He is the one who created all these things. Yes, it is possible that, as far as I know is concerned, because the Quran says, for example, the purpose of this resurrection is precisely for judgment, for justice. Because that shows that one of the ways of justice is that there must be witness, there must be, the person must be brought before the judge. Yes, so the law, modern law, actually derived from religion. This idea about the habeas corpus, ideas about and procedure of justice, because it's, of course, this is clear in the Quran. It's not clear in the Bible or in the, but the Quran is very clear on this. It says that, the Quran says that, now, Islau al-yawma bima kuntum takfurun. Al-yawma nakhtimu ala afwahihim wa tukallimuna aydihim wa tashhadu arjuluhum. Anyway, there. Now, I'm sorry, I sort of missed something there. But in other words, it means today, this is the day that you have rejected, you have not believed. The day in which your hands will, with your legs, yes, will be against you, witnesses. Your mouth will be shut up. So in other words, if we use reason, we use logic. I know some of the ulama in the past, even for that matter, if I'm not mistaken, including Al-Ghazali, talks about the resurrection is a similar kind of body. But forgive me if I may humbly admit that although it is my thought, I thought that, but there is evidence in the Quran which says that the witnesses are these organs of ethical ethical organs of action. Yes, your legs, your hands, because only the original can be witness. Isn't it? If God creates new ones, how can it become a witness? It's only the original one that can be a witness. The leg say, yes, I walked that way that day, either to do good or to do evil. The hand, the same thing, to do good or to do evil. The original one can only be a witness. If it is something newly created, then that cannot be a witness, because it can say, I don't know. So the idea is that, therefore, the man, the soul, his ultimate reality, the soul, cannot deny. It cannot deny itself. So in other words, this procedure of justice, the idea, sometimes they argue, some of the philosophers argue, it's not possible. They said, how can there be a resurrection? There will be problems. What about if a cannibal, a man eats another man? How is he going to be resurrected? Because he has become, the flesh of the other man has become his flesh, and so on. Of course, if you talk like this, as I said, the law of physics, that becomes all confused. And sometimes people like confusion, especially if it goes into the papers. So in other words, about this resurrection, the way I understand, my humble before God, perhaps there are two stages. Because some of them also argue, the thinkers in the past, the theologians, even some of the Sufis, that how, for example, about this, whether it is the original body or it's a new one. Because when the Holy Prophet returned from the Menara, he was saying what he has witnessed. He said he saw this, the paradise and so on. And then he said everybody is of the same. Yes, there was an old woman who wept. She said, how can I, am I not going to paradise because she is old? The Prophet said, no. In other words, everyone there will be the prime of life, in their prime of life, in other words. And so some of these people argue by saying that this means that it's not the same body. Yes? Because if it is the same body, it will not be like that. So as I was saying just now, I can understand this. We have to explain it in two stages. One, the first stage is that resurrection, the judgment. That one, you must have the original to become witness. After that, after the judgment, now that is something else. Yes, because the Quran also speaks those people who will be in paradise enjoying themselves and so on like that, and the ones who are in suffering, the ones who continually have to be suffer without end. And these are all showing that they are different kind of somehow or other different creation, as it were. But the first stage, the judgment, I think that because of the witnesses, therefore it has to be the original. in other words, this about the philosophers, about the disagreement by Al-Ghazali and so on, only deals with the three. Many of the things that the philosophers said, I think we are not in disagreement with that, because that's already said in the religion about the soul, about the fact that we said when God introduced the soul to the body, then a third entity has come into existence, that is man. And that is elevated. That means his rank is of a higher level. Although that depends upon him. That's why that Quran said, الإنسان في أحسن تقويم. Although he said, ثم رددناه أسفل السافلين. That, of course, those people who are evil among mankind, they will be returned. They will be, as it were, pushed back to a state that is even worse than the lowest animals. So, in other words, a lot of this are from the Quran, that's what I'm saying, not from the philosophers, not just from theology, it's from what we can see in the Holy Quran, or at least what some of us can see. And therefore, when they say, well, this is all not in the Quran, someone did ask a question, how is it that we are talking a lot about the soul, and yet the Quran says nothing very much about the soul, very little, he said. And that's his opinion. His understanding of the Quran he may not see these things. Yes? So in other words, we must not just conclude, this is not in the Quran, this is not in the Hadith. And now about insan, we have been talking about that, about bashar. The word bashar also refers to man, as far as in Islam, to insan, in other words, not to homo, to insan. This has to do with the skin. The skin. What is enveloped by the skin. And a smooth skin, man, that is not covered in hair, not with fur, but smooth. And what is inside that skin? Yeah. So in other words, it refers to the flesh and blood man. That's what it is, bashar. Now, both insan and bashar is used for both male and female, men and women. Not just men, women also. They are called insan and bashar also. And then another thing is that the word bashar refers only to insan. You cannot use that to refer to these creatures who existed before Nabi Adam. They are not called bashar, they are just called wild. They are called the Banu Wash. They are wild. But they are not human, as far as we are concerned. Although I think from the anthropological point of view, they are still called homo. But from our point of view, they are not human. So we are Bani Adam. We are the children of Adam. We originated with Adam. This is insan. And therefore, when we in English speak humanity, human, we are referring to insan. And the bashar part, the flesh and blood. That only refers to insan, because the Quran says, for example, the Prophet, Innama ana basharun mithlukum. The Prophet is asked to say that to those people who disagree with him. In other words, I am only a man like you. Yes? Meaning a flesh and blood man, that's what it is. All prophets are asked to say that. Because the same with the Jewish prophets also. Syed Musa and others. Because the Jews even, they were very insolent with their prophets. They said, who are you? Why should we believe you? They said to the prophets. Why must God send the revelation to you? Yes. Why does not He Himself come down in a canopy of clouds? This in the Quran is coming down in a canopy of clouds. And so, in other words, the idea is I am a man like you, so that you can understand me. You can understand my speech. Yes? Because otherwise you cannot understand. So that is the reason. And therefore, I think there is a saying attributed to the Prophet in which he said, Adamu Abul Bashar wa ana Abul Arwah. In other words, Adam is the father of Bashar, of flesh and blood. I am the father of spirits. And I think because of that, in the Arabic language, the expression Abul Bashar refers to the Prophet Adam. So I think I will not go on speaking until 11. So everyone, maybe you might like to make some comments or questions, whatever it is that I can answer. I will try to do that. Thank you very much.
Time for you to raise question and answer. But do write your question precisely, or your comment also if you want to give short and precise questions.